Welcome to In Focus with Ejaz Haider. Tonight's discussion begins with a delusional statement by India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh that the BJP government will carry out so much development in the region in the coming years. And this region that we are talking about is the occupied Jammu and Kashmir, that people of Azad Kashmir will demand to be part of India. This will lead to the fulfillment of Indian Parliament's resolution that AJK is an integral part of India. One would have simply laughed at this if the intentions of this RSS-BJP government weren't so sinister. We wonder what the people of Indian occupied and annexed Kashmir would think of this statement, given that they have been under a lockdown since 5th August last year, have lost dozens of lives since then, lost nearly $2.5 billion in economic activity, have had no digital communication, have had to see new domicile laws that threaten to turn the occupied territory into Bantustans. Ironically, Mr. Singh also told his captive audience that India is no longer a weak power. This is the same 56-inch chest syndrome that began with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's boast. In an ironic twist, People's Liberation Army troops killed 3 Indian Army personnel, including a Lieutenant Colonel, in a clash in Galwan sector at the line of actual control. Mr. Singh will now have to prove that the Indian Army can actually take on an army and not just unarmed, hapless Kashmiri boys. To discuss this, we have with us Professor Rajiv. Professor Kumar teaches at the University of Heidelberg. We are also joined by Ambassador Tasnim Aslam, former Special Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we shall also be joined by Mr. Zaffar Qureshi, who is Chairman of Kashmir Campaign Global, and will join us from London. But let's begin with Professor Kumar here. Professor Kumar, what utter travesty of everything, this Rajnath Singh statement, that we will do so much for Kashmir that people of Azad Jammu and Kashmir would want to come and join with India. I mean, it's just laughable.
Oh, yes, absolutely. But one could ask them, what prevented them from doing until now what they are claiming to do it in future, so that people of Azad Kashmir and Gilgit and Baltistan will clamor to join India? So what prevented? Why are they not doing even now what they profess to do in future? So what they have instead done, they have, people in Kashmir right now, they are deprived of communication channels. It's like they have put people's life in jeopardy. So there are these, the careers of young people, those are at stake, because they don't have access to 4G communication links. So their communication link is restricted to this 2G. And that was also granted to them after starting from, as you said, from August 5th until the beginning of this year, they didn't have any access to the outside world. And even when limited access was granted, then after that, they were not allowed to access social media. And even now, if anybody posts anything which is perceived as critical towards Indian government or India's handling of Kashmir, so those people are immediately summoned to police. So I don't know what development they are talking about. Is it development for? It's just like I think we discussed it many times. So India's goal is just they want land of Kashmir, and that they want without people of Kashmir. So that's the.
So Professor Kumar, BJP constantly says, and I've had one of the BJP spokespersons a couple of times on my program, and they say, well, we are actually speaking for the Kashmiris and for the Hindu Kashmiris. Now, you being both, are they speaking for you?
No. Oh, actually, this is because it's a little bit complicated thing that, so they are, first of all, they are not speaking for anyone. They are just speaking for this Indian nationalism and nothing else. And that too, their definition of nationalism is very narrow. It's just like Hindu right-wing nationalism. So considering, at least they are not speaking for me, because I know that, because I was in Kashmir until 1991.
Correct.
So I know what happened in Kashmir. So in Kashmir, whatever happened in Kashmir, it was because of intransigence of Indian government. So it's like that. That would mean that that predates to BJP government. So that has been, India has been always short-sighted when it came to deal with Kashmir.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Stay with me, Professor Kumar. Let me also pull in Ambassador Tasnim Aslam here. Ambassador Aslam, $2.5 billion lost in economic activity. Schools, children are not going to schools. Teenage boys are getting killed or arrested or both. So what kind of haven is Mr. Rajnath Singh talking about, which will force people of Azad Kashmir, that happens to be both you and me, that we would be so impressed that we would actually opt for joining with India?
Really, as the Foreign Office described his statement, it's delusional. It's not just delusional. It is also, they are trying to fool people of India, not Kashmir. They know Kashmiris understand, they know what is happening. At one level, it is sinister, but at another level, 6 months back, or even 3 months back, they were talking about taking Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan from Pakistan by force. India was also talking about two-front war, and their army chief was boasting that India can take on China and Pakistan at the same time. What is happening on the line of actual control and with Nepal, and it's very interesting how India is responding to that situation. They're trying to play down what is happening with China and obviously misleading their people. Yesterday, the Nepalese, there are reports that Nepalese police opened fire on what they say Indians say that Indian farmers were killed. They have tried to play down that incident as well. Somehow they think that with Pakistan they can continue this kind of belligerent behavior and they will get away with it, or somehow they will divert attention from the thrashing they got from China or how Nepal is finally standing up to India. So it is at one level, it's that. Secondly, they haven't done any development in IOK. On the contrary, whatever happened in the past or the money that came in because of tourism, even that has stopped for now almost a year. On the 4th of August, it will be 1 year since Kashmir has been locked down. Simultaneously, they are taking over Kashmiri land by force. I know that Kashmiris are not selling it, but that land is being, and Indian Army is now claiming the land they were using as their own. So the ground realities are very, very different from what Rajnath was trying to project them to be. But that is not just, that doesn't just concern the situation in Indian occupied and annexed Kashmir. It also, India is equally delusional about what they are doing to the Indian state, what is happening there, how Muslims are being lynched and killed and discriminated against. Particularly, you would have seen reports how in COVID-19, Muslims are not getting treatment. In fact, there was a viral video of a doctor saying that Muslims should be injected COVID-19 so that they die and we get rid of them. So this blatant discrimination against its own citizens, and then they go and talk about an occupied people that they were going to invest so much money and create such prosperity that other countries and parts of other countries would come running to them. So this is, one can only dismiss it with contempt that it deserves.
Absolutely. But let me go back to Professor Kumar here. Professor Kumar, successive governments in India have been talking about these development packages and the rest of it. But there are also reports of the levels of corruption and the fact that the money doesn't really reach the people. And quite apart from that, people have always rejected this. I mean, they've said, look, it's not simply an issue of money. It's an issue of our political right to self-determination, to determine how we want to live and in what way. So give us a sense of, after they annexed Kashmir, Prime Minister Modi had come and made a long speech and told the Indians the benefits of the illegal action that was taken, and then, honey and manna will now fall on Kashmir. All of that was basically an eyewash. So give us a sense of, this whole talk about development packages and where the money goes.
Just like there are two things. One is comedy and other is tragedy. So, when BJP talks about development, so they don't, because for them it's just like, but the history of Kashmir predates BJP. That's one thing. When accession was, the instrument of accession was signed, it was temporary. So, and after that, every successive Indian government did was they just tried to take away the autonomy of the state piece by piece. So, but still, so they still maintained a charade of this autonomy, that Article 370 was there, and then there's Article 35A. So this is when this BJP actually, this is somehow, I feel a little bit incorrect to call it BJP government. It's a Modi government. And I am a little bit surprised to see resurgence of Rajnath, and then there was another minister doing, because this government is basically, it's a 1.5 man government, that Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah. So this resurgence of this Rajnath Singh is because of what they are facing with China. So they are under tremendous pressure from China. So that's why they are trying to find scapegoat in Pakistan. So now they are trying to talk about development in Kashmir, so that people, Azad Kashmir, will be clamoring to join India. So that's all humbug. So because if they want to develop Kashmir, so then they should ask people of Kashmir what they want. So people of Kashmir, the one thing is that people of Kashmir are not poor. They are self-reliant people, and they don't want any money. They want dignity. They want this freedom from everyday humiliations that are visited upon them by Indian security forces. They want their own way of life. They don't want India to tell them how to run their affairs. They don't want how Indian forces should tell them when to play and when not to play. So this since August 2019, mosques remain locked for months and months. They were not, those traditional mosques where people have been praying for centuries, they were not allowed to access those mosques. So it's much more than economic development.
Absolutely.
It's just like it's basic human dignity issue of, that's the main issue.
Absolutely.
So which Indian government, particularly under Modi, Kashmiris have been deprived of that.
Absolutely. Truer words spoken. Thank you so much, Professor Rajiv Kumar, for speaking with us. Ambassador Aslam, I think Professor Rajiv Kumar is spot on in terms of what it is that the Kashmiris want, and not what successive Indian governments have been promising Kashmiris.
There's no doubt about that. From the Indian point of view, since they think that is something that is done and dusted, there's no way for Kashmiris now to get their right to self-determination. So what they think they can tempt them with is hefty economic package or development where they will get the prosperity and their life will improve. But even there, Indians, it's been almost a year from day one after annexation, they started talking about foreign investment and holding international investment conferences in Kashmir and bringing in billions and billions of dollars and turning the
the problem is that the Kashmiris have already lost about $2.5 billion according to their own Chamber of Commerce and Industry because there is no digital activity, businesses are kind of, shutting down and the rest of it. I mean, the Kashmiris didn't really need their development package if they were allowed, if they could do their own economic activity.
Well, but at this stage, I think for Kashmiris, it has gone much beyond economic packages or tourism, because they have, even when India tried to reopen the economic activity, Kashmiris voluntarily on their own, they kept their businesses shut down, and they help each other make it through the day, providing each other food items, etc. But they are now more focused or completely focused on getting their right to self-determination. They think that India has now finally crossed the last Rubicon and now it is beyond their tolerance level. And every day people are dying, they're sacrificing their lives. Why would anyone think, if Mr. Rajnath or Modi or anyone in India had little understanding of the Kashmiri mindset right now, they think they can perhaps tempt them with opening Kashmir and allowing them local autonomy or withdrawing troops. Probably if they had little political sense, these are the measures they would have thought about. But
the problem is, yes, they're doubling down on their original folly. That's the problem. But thank you so much. That was Ambassador Tasnim Aslam speaking with us. I'm also joined by Mr. Zaffar Qureshi, who is chairman of Kashmir Campaign Global. Mr. Qureshi, thank you for being with us quickly. We were talking about Rajnath Singh making these absolutely ludicrous claims about, we're going to do so much for occupied Kashmir that people from Azad Kashmir would want to join up with India, which is such a laughable thing. We were just discussing that, the Indian government is doubling down on its original folly, and I think it's not going to go anywhere. And now, of course, they've got their problem in Eastern Ladakh also with China. So and Nepal is standing up to India. So the Indian foreign policy is kind of coming apart.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ejaz, for the time and the FSA you put for Kashmir. Fantasizing over things that would never come true or denying the realities that stares the Indian government as evidently their lack of comprehension on the evidence that's been provided by the leading researchers, I think is nothing less than being delusional. The people of Kashmir, as our ambassador said, our struggle for freedom is not based on having a development in Kashmir or having equal rights under the Indian Constitution. It is a political struggle where we want a complete freedom from the Indian illegal occupation and then determine our future through a peaceful right of self-determination as promised by the international world and community. So his statements coming out and saying, we will develop Kashmir to such an extent that the other people of Azad Kashmir would want to join in. I think Mr. Rajnath needs to face the reality and realize that even their own territories are not being developed yet. We even talk about the other Indian occupied territories such as Assam, Nagaland, Skims, and Khalistan, which did not have Article 370s or 71s, and Indian government had a free range to develop them. They have failed to develop their own country. And this is not me saying that. You got leading researchers such as Derace, who wrote a beautiful article in the National Herald of India, which paints the contrast, the stark contrast reality of the Indian economy. As you mentioned, when it comes to their foreign policy, the Indian neighbors of India, China, Nepal, who have realized what India is trying to achieve and how it has become a dangerous, in fact, it always was a dangerous country, but now that the rise of the fascism, which has been unmasked by the Modi government, is not just a threat to the people within India, the minorities especially, we read it on the news, how the Muslims and the other minorities in India are being targeted, killed, their rights violated. This is something that will spill over the Asian subcontinent into China, into Nepal, and I think the world in general is now realizing how dangerous the Indian government is and their ideologies are.
Absolutely. Before I wrap up, Mr. Qureshi, there's another policy that the Indian security forces, occupation forces have basically adopted, which is that after the martyr, these Kashmiri boys, they do not give the bodies back to the families and they take them to a remote area and bury them there. And one of the reasons they're doing this, according to sources inside occupied Kashmir, is because people would gather and mourn, obviously, the martyr. They would also raise slogans of Azadi, wrap the body in the Pakistan flag, and so on and so forth. So that gives a much better sense of what the ground reality is than these delusional statements by people like Rajnath Singh.
He claims that the Tiranga is on the rise. The reality is the people of Kashmir have always fought against the illegal occupation of India. There is no Tiranga on the rise, but every day we see more and more Kashmiris raising their voice, irrespective of all the tools and mechanisms that India is employing in Kashmir to curb the voices of the people of Kashmir for freedom, for justice, and for peace. We must realize India claims to be a secular and democratic, yet, as I said before, the minorities of India are targeted. In reality, India has become a failed nation of secularism and democracy. No democracy exists in India, especially in Kashmir. It definitely is something that a nation that has failed, which was built on the principles of secularism, democracy, and republic, but none of those principles exist in the current India.
Absolutely. This is now coercive Hindutva authoritarianism. But thank you so much. That was Mr. Zaffar Qureshi speaking with us. We shall take a short break and return to discuss a vote by Nepal's parliament to approve a new national emblem with a political map that claims its territories disputed with India. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. The next item tonight is the approval by Nepal's lower house of parliament of a new national emblem with a political map that includes territories disputed with India. An amendment bill for a revised national emblem to include the new map was passed by the House of Representatives on Saturday. Speaker Agni Prasad Sapkota said there were no votes against. The amendment will have to be endorsed by the National Assembly and the President before it is implemented. Meanwhile, India, already locked in a conflict with China in eastern Ladakh, has said the Nepalese move is untenable. The two sides have been wrangling since India last month opened a new 80-kilometer road in Uttarakhand state leading up to the disputed Lipu Lake Pass. Nepal condemned the move and its cabinet decided to publish a new political map that includes Lipu Lake and contested zones in Kalapani and Limpiadhura. To discuss this further, we are joined by Tika, Dhakal, a PhD scholar in political science, and Mr. Nishant Verma, an analyst in Delhi. Thank you for being on the program. Let me play it like this, Mr. Dhakal. You get the floor. Give us a quick view of the Nepalese viewpoint, and then I will go to Mr. Nishant Verma.
Well, Ejaz, there is actually a lot of history to it. But to make the long story very short, what has been agreed between Nepal and India over the past several years that there is a border issue, there is an outstanding border issue. Actually, this issue was discussed between Nepal and India since 1970s. Because those were the times when border negotiations were taking place on ad hoc basis. But immediately the two countries recognized the problem. In 1981, a joint technical committee was established. That technical committee recommended that this issue has to be resolved at the political level because it was beyond the ability of the technical team to sort this out. So this was recommended to the highest political level. On several occasions, the prime ministers of the two countries have agreed that this should be resolved at the political level. This should be resolved on the table of diplomacy. So this has been actually the stuff. But what happens was, suddenly when status quo was supposed to be maintained, India publishes a new map that creates a kind of a domestic pressure here in Nepal. And then Nepal requests for diplomatic negotiations again, but foreign secretary level talks, which were supposed to happen, never happened. And then Nepal publishes the new map. Because the Nepalese emblem, national coat of arms, contains the map of Nepal, Nepalese constitution needs to be amended because of that. But it is not the case with India because their national emblem does not have their national map. That's why even when India publishes the national political maps, their constitutional amendment is not required, while it is not the case with Nepal. And on top of it, there has been an unprecedented level of national unity on this issue here in Nepal. This is not the case like in the past.
Okay.
The political parties here have unanimously voted in the House of Representatives for the new political map, and it has been now it is now under discussion at the National Assembly, the upper house. So it is only a matter of time. In a couple of days, it will also be endorsed. Having said that, this issue again needs to be solved from the diplomatic table. And that is only the option. This is a bilateral issue between Nepal and India. Those historical ties, those linkages, they all have to be taken into account by both countries, and they have to sit for the negotiating table. That's the only option Ejaz at the moment.
Okay, great. This is a very good overview, Mr. Dhakal. Thank you for that. Mr. Verma, now, before you say something with reference to what Mr. Dhakal has said, the sense one gets is that this particular BJP government has almost failed on all foreign policy fronts. Relations with Pakistan, relations now with Nepal, which is traditionally been very friendly to India, relations now with China. So it seems that this whole 56-inch chest syndrome is now catching up. But that's the perception that is now developing. So over to you, sir, for your view.
Thank you much. The failure or success of the BJP government within India is a subject which I would not focus on today because that's something very different. My primary focus remains on the topic, and the topic is the Indo-Nepal relationship and what I consider the high-headedness of Nepal in order to publish something through their parliament, which is still disputed and is supposedly to be resolved bilaterally through a political dialogue. I well understand that because at the background when Nepal suddenly has Mandarin compulsory in all the schools, there seems to be a political shift within Nepal than India. In India, yes, we have different parties which come and go at the center, and the helm is controlled in a different manner. However, the Indian policy, in order to relate with its neighbors ever since 1947, has only evolved and evolved for the subcontinent's benefit. While I say so, I must inform every viewer of your channel that whatever the dispute remains between Indo-Nepal behavior of the land dispute that we consider has to be resolved through a mutual political dialogue, and it cannot be on a unilateral side of either Nepal or India to go into the parliament, publish certain things, and assume as a utopian behavior that, oh, things have been resolved and now a part of Uttarakhand, which is very much India, now becomes a Nepalese part. No. I will not want to go into the depth of the dependency of Nepal over India in terms of survival as a country, because that would demean Nepal as a sovereign nation, and I per se would not, as a cultural Indian, would ever do so for any country.
Okay. Now, from what I understood, what Mr. Dhakal said, he said that it was Delhi that changed the maps, and because Delhi does not require a constitutional amendment, they could do it, whereas Nepal needed a constitutional amendment, so they had to move this through parliament. So this is Nepalese action is in reaction to what Delhi did. And secondly, he also mentioned that this is an issue that needs to be resolved politically. So this is what I understood from what Mr. Dhakal said, but I will let Mr. Dhakal take the floor now to respond to what you said.
This issue, the boundary issue, as I said before, is entirely a matter between Nepal and India, and it has to be resolved in a mutually acceptable way between the two countries. But the way, any third country is brought in between, it is unacceptable. Actually, referring to Mandarin and everything, all these things, I don't want to go in detail, but let me tell to every audience of your channel that India is actually using its agreements with China in the past regarding Lipu Lake to buttress its claim over the area. While Nepal has presented historical facts and so many other details many times in the past to assert its sovereign claim over the over the Lipu Lake, Alapani, and Limpiadura areas. That's why what I see is there is a way that a third country, namely China, is being pulled again and again. I think it is because of the domestic constituency or domestic narrative of India. I don't want to go into that, but it is purely a bilateral issue. It has been on the table between Nepal and India for several decades, and India is actually using its agreements with China to prove its claim over the areas. That's why there is no question of China being behind what Nepal has done. It's Nepal's sovereign decision, it's Nepal's own decision, it's the decision of Nepal's parliament, it's the decision of Nepal's political parties, and it's the decision purely of Nepal government.
Correct, correct. But Mr. Verma said that was a high-handed decision.
How would you say high-handed? Because Nepal has been asking for diplomatic communications, through written communications, to come to the table again and again. All the talks happen, several ministerial level talks happen on other issues, but this issue has been often sidelined, and this issue has often been, shelved out of priority from New Delhi.
In fact, one report suggested that after this opening of the road, Nepal had sent notes both to India and China.
Not after the road. After the road, Nepal sent notes to India alone twice that this is not acceptable. Let's sit for talks. Once after the road. And in November 2019, the political map of India when it was published, Nepal sent two diplomatic notes, one after the other, that what India has done now through publication of map is not acceptable, because that shows the Nepal's sovereign territories in India's, under India. That's why Nepal rejected that, and Nepal sent diplomatic notes reminding past promises, past pledges of communication, diplomatic negotiations. And now also, Nepal is prepared. Nepal is offensively actually for talks at this moment. That's why there is no substance to any claim that the move that Nepal had was a high-handed decision. I mean, there is no substance at all to this.
Okay.
I'm sorry to say that.
Let's go back to Mr. Nishant Verma. Mr. Verma, I know that you said that you would not want to go into the depths of how much Nepal is dependent on India, but it seems to me that the Indian government at least twice over many years, has actually blockaded Nepal just to teach Kathmandu a lesson, as some Indian analysts said. So if this goes any further, do you think that the current government will resort to that kind of action?
Okay, first of all, I would cement it here that India considers all its neighbors to be friends and in relation with each other because we all belong to the same subcontinent. So there is in no way, while referring to Nepal, that we would like to escalate anything which may harm the relationship, forget anything else. Having said that, let's be very clear about my statement on high-handed behavior of Nepal, and let me clarify in a bit. See, we live in a world where even a divorce takes a few years and it does not happen over a snap of the fingers. So when a disputed land issue between two countries is to be resolved through diplomatic and political manner, it will take some time. However, Nepal has gone ahead and unilaterally, under the garb of their constitutional mannerism, tried to show India that, see, this is our land and we have taken a decision. Now that is unacceptable because a disputed land would mean that nobody knows.
But sir, what would you say to what Mr. Dhakal is saying, that it was India last year when it published its maps, it showed these disputed territories as part of India?
No, when you talk disputed territories, which ones are you referring to? Let me be very clear when I ask you this.
The territories that we're talking about.
The territory which has been shown on Indian map is considered to be ours, and that is disputed by Nepal, and hence it is to be resolved. Now, Nepal cannot come on top of it and say, no, this is my land and I have done. So the idea is it's a disputed land. We definitely show it. For example, the Jammu and Kashmir of India, we know what is our land and we show the map accordingly. Now, it can be a conflict in terms of geopolitical behavior between India-Pakistan or India-China, but then that we will show that this is ours. In similar manner, the Indo-Nepalese border has been shown very correctly by India. If Nepal has a problem, which it has, the dialogue is on. Now, unilaterally, they have gone ahead and said that, no, we are publishing, and the disputed land as per them has been shown as their own land. I don't think India is going to accept that. It's a matter of laugh, I'm sorry. But yes, Nepal needs to understand this, that the brotherly relationship of ages and decades cannot be deteriorated just because you have a shift in power, or even per se, it's not to demean Nepal, but even in India, if there's a shift of power which inclines towards a certain power in the world, and hence it tries to play with our own friendly, brotherly neighbors, no, unacceptable.
Okay, right. I've also almost run out of time, but Mr. Dhakal wants to put in a word. Mr. Dhakal, over to you before I wrap up.
Those territories which are shown in Nepal's map have been Nepal's historically since 1816. Nepal had a war with the then East India Company. There was a territorial agreement. That is the only treaty that is about Nepal's border so far. Even after the independence of India, there have been treaty of peace and friendship. There have been other treaties regarding the water resources, but there have been no boundary treaties with India. So those were the treaties that we accepted so far. And we would like India to accept those treaties, to honor those treaties, which show that those geographical parts belong to Nepal.
Okay. Thank you to Mr. Tika Dhakal. Thank you also to Mr. Nishant Verma. That is the situation at the Indo-Nepalese border and the disputed territories. But this is all from In Focus tonight. We shall see you tomorrow at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.